What's up, guys? Welcome back to Eagle Central. And today we're going to recap the game week 2 here, where the Philadelphia Eagles beat the Minnesota Vikings 34 to 28. And was this one just infuriating at times, especially at the start, because yet again, everybody there was booing early on with how piss poor the offense was, especially the play calling, which again, Brian Johnson just didn't have the best performance play calling. Granted, he did get better as the game went on, but at the same time, I can't give him too much of a pat on the back here because there wasn't much creativity really with the offense. It was mostly just Swift running the football, and the Eagles ended up winning. And the defense definitely had some moments during the game where they looked piss poor, but for the most part, they were good. They were forcing a good amount of turnovers. But at the same time, the secondary, granted, I know that we can't take too much stock into how poor the secondary played because Bradbury's hurt, because Blankenship did not play this game either. So we can't take much stock into how the secondary was. But man, Goodrich and Job made me want to pull my hair out all night. Evans was brutal as well. And it's just, again, I understand that there's not much they could do. This is the hand that they're dealt with right now with all the injuries, but this is just not ideal. And the secondary looked lazy, and the defense, even in the last drive, like even the defensive line seemed a bit lazy. Not as much as the secondary and the linebackers were, but it felt like the team got lazy on the last drive, but we'll talk about it. Before we do, leave a like on the video if you do enjoy, subscribe if you guys are new, especially if you're Eagles fans, and turn on your notifications so you know when I upload or go live here on the channel. But let's talk about it. Drive 1 for the Eagles was actually very impressive for the most part. They end up getting a nice little screenplay to Smith. Hurts runs for a first 2. Goddard got targeted early. Unfortunately, it wasn't really for a gain of any yards, but Hurts ends up finding Devontae Smith, and that gets them into the red zone. It was nice to see an aggressive play call from Johnson, but at the same time, Jalen Hurts ended up underthrowing that football there, and if that was placed perfectly, Devontae Smith ends up getting a touchdown, and we're talking about an even bigger blowout potentially, or just a blowout in general, because this wasn't really a blowout, but they ended up trying to run the football in from the red zone. They couldn't end up doing it, so they had to settle for a field goal. So 3-0 for the Eagles at least. So again, you would like them to score, but at least there was some improvement in terms of things, sort of, in the first drive. I can't really even say there wasn't really much improvement. Then for the defense on the Vikings first drive, Jefferson ended up getting some big yards. Slay did not really look good on Jefferson early. He ended up adjusting, and he ended up being fine later on. There was only a couple big plays, really, by Jefferson on Darius Slay in particular. But because Slay was the only one that... Slay was the only corner that came to play all night. And again, I know he's the only talented one, really, on this roster with everyone hurt in the secondary, but because Maddox also had to leave the game also, which I forgot to mention in the beginning. But again, like Slay, it was pretty easy to see what the Vikings had to do. All they had to do was throw the ball where Darius Slay was not. So that's really all they had to do. Granted, it was easier said than done for them because of the fact that their offensive line is terrible, and also this defensive line is unbelievable. The Eagles' defensive line, that is. But Eagles ended up holding them, thankfully, and that ended up being a punt there. So then the Eagles come out for their second drive, and unfortunately, they end up really not doing much there at all on that drive there. I think it was a 3-and-out, and then, which, first of all, they almost lost it themselves on the punt return to fumble it. They almost lost it on the punt return there. But thankfully then, on the 3-and-out, the Eagles end up forcing a fumble on the punt there. So they end up getting the ball back, thankfully. So that changed the game and was huge. Sort of. They didn't capitalize on that drive, on the third drive. The Eagles really didn't do much. Swift had a couple of huge gains there, 3 in a row there. Hurts then on 3rd and long threw an interception, and for whatever reason he threw it to Smith, who was double covered. For the life of me, cannot understand that, but sure, it's like worrying me. I'm not giving up on Hurts, but it's scaring me how he's just not reading the field at all, and I just don't know what to say. I mean, we didn't even really get to see much of him trying to throw the football in this game because, one, the run game was working. Two, I have a feeling that they just didn't trust him with how poor he was reading the field between last week and this week. But at some point, they're going to have to trust him if that's what it was. So we'll have to see. But then the defense, again, ends up getting a fumble. Maddox ends up forcing a fumble there on Madison, and then Evans ends up scooping it. So all of a sudden, the Eagles get another chance on offense there, and again, didn't capitalize on it. Brown ends up getting a screen pass, and then it ends up being 3rd and 5 at one point, and they end up running the football for whatever reason because Brian Johnson, again, does not know what he's doing. And then Elliott ended up missing the field goal, and the crowd did not love it. They were raining boos. Then the defense on the Vikings' 3rd drive, Cox had a bad penalty on that one. Osborne ended up getting a first. Carter looked good on that drive. Carter looked good in the game in general, I thought, or especially in the first half. He kind of faded out in the second half. Not saying he was bad, but he wasn't really noticeable in the second half the way that he was in the first half. But Hawkinson then got a first too. Evans just looked terrible there. Maddox ended up being hurt. Jefferson then got a first down into the red zone, and then Hawkinson ended up getting a touchdown because the secondary just was brutal, and the line couldn't even get enough pressure either. That made it 7-3. Then we go to the 5th drive for the offense, and thankfully the Eagles figured it out to some regard because that's when they figured, hey, why don't we just run the football a lot? And that's really where we started to see the Eagles' game plan was going to be to just run the football an obnoxious amount. And Swift ended up getting a couple of runs, got 4 runs to start that drive, ended up picking up 2 first downs. Hurts and Scott were getting involved in the run game too, since Swift is catching his breath on the sideline. Brown then with a first down after Hurts read the field pretty well there. So as much as I was complaining about him not reading the field well, he did there. And Swift ended up picking up another first down, and Hurts ended up running it in for a touchdown. 10-7 game there. Hallelujah. The offense figured it out. Sorta. I mean, they figured out that they just needed to run the football. But again, I would like to see Hurts throw the football well. Something I would like to see. Then the Vikings on their 4th drive, no pressure really from the line in the first play. Osborne was wide open. Goodrich just looked terrible. Maddox and Bradbury were, like I said, were desperately missed. Jefferson then made a big catch, almost got into the end zone, but he ended up dropping it there, and it was by the cone, so they ended up calling a touchback, so the Eagles ended up getting the football, and thankfully, Brian Johnson yet again gets bailed out here because Brian Johnson was ready to wave the white flag. 30-plus seconds on the clock, he calls a running play. Swift gets a good amount of yards. Or it might have been Scott on the run, but Scott got the second run for sure. Ended up picking up a huge amount of yards, and then Johnson's like, oh, let's actually try to get maybe a field goal. Maybe if they had the killer mentality from the beginning, they could have marched further down the field. Granted, I don't know if they would have got a touchdown. I'm not claiming they would have, but just would have been nice to see more of a killer instinct and more aggression from this team, because that's what made this offense so special last year, is Steichen especially calling aggressive offensive plays. And it's just, I just wish Hurts then took too much time on one of the plays, and that killed the clock so much. Hurts did that way too much at times in this game. And then thankfully Elliott though was able to kick a 61-yarder, the second of his career. One of them was against the Giants. That made it 13-7. So that was the first half there. My takeaways for the first half was Brian Johnson was just a coward in that first half. Like, I just didn't like some of the play calling. It got better as the game went on and as the half went on, but I didn't like the way that last drive went down the first half. I really don't. Hurts wasn't scanning the field the best. Swift looked very good. He continued that for the rest of the night. The secondary desperately missed Bradbury, Blankenship, and Maddox. I could say that about the entire game, but that's just what I wrote down the notes for my first half takeaways. And then Carter and Davis. I did not mention Jordan Davis once somehow. Both of them were animals, especially in that first half. Jordan Davis has been an animal so far this season, so I'm very excited about what Jordan Davis is bringing to the table here. Then we get to the third quarter, and the defense comes out guns a-blazing as Sweat forced a fumble, and that ended up putting the Eagles right in the red zone. And thankfully, this is something that really made the difference too in this game. That fumble is something that you need to remember. Sweat was another one who was just an animal all night, especially in the second half for him. That play is one that really saved the Eagles because it put them right in good position to end up just having a couple plays where Swift ended up bringing it right to the line. Hurts pushed it in. That made it a 20-7 game. And then after that, they ended up announcing Watkins and Maddox would be done for the night. So that was the unfortunate part. Sorry, I had the cough there. But on the sixth drive for the Vikings, Cunningham made Madison lose some yards, and then that's pretty much all that happened. It was a 3-and-out. The offense on the eighth drive, Hurts, chef's kiss, beautiful long pass to Devontae Smith, and then he brings it to the house to make it a 27-7 game. Chef's kiss, beautiful throw, and then Smith has just been an animal this year too, and I'm excited to see what he could do. I mean, this entire team, I'm just loving it. And then even some of the offensive line members too. I mean, I was gonna get to Kelsey too, who had a very underrated play, another one who was just an animal as well. The seventh drive though for the Vikings, Jefferson gets it first. Morrow almost got to Cousin, but unfortunately couldn't. But that was the Nakobe Dean replacement. We had questions about Morrow. Didn't really do much in the game that wowed you, but that would have been a good moment there. Slay then with a nice play on Jefferson. Could have been a holding call, but I don't feel bad considering how much the refs really hosed the Eagles at points in this game, especially later on, which we'll get to. Like, I just want everyone to spare Eagle fans of the fact that we should feel bad about that rule being stupid about the touchback when there were some blatant things that were missed, but we'll get into that later on. The defensive line couldn't get the Cousins though, and then Addison was downfield, and Job, I just don't understand what that effort was of a tackle, but he misses the tackle, and it's a 27-14 game. All of a sudden, Boston Scott's in concussion protocol, didn't return for the rest of the game, so Penny ended up being forced into action, and which was nice, though, I guess, because Penny did have a couple nice plays, but the offense on their ninth drive, Dickerson took a bad holding penalty, and that killed momentum because Swift had a big run there, so they ended up calling that back. Then there was a false start, too, on Swift. That moved it back. Another 3-and-out, though. A weird 3-and-out, but a 3-and-out. But then the defense, thankfully, forced a 3-and-out. Cunningham had some nice plays there. Cunningham, he had some nice plays, but at the end of the game, he looked brutal at times too. And then the offense on their next drive, this was a chaotic one. As it was the end of the third and it carried over into the fourth. Swift ended up getting some runs. Goddard had a short pass. Kelsey with some nice blocks from the O-line ended up having some nice blocks. Penny got involved with a run, had a catch as well. And then, thankfully, at the end of the quarter, the Eagles ended up forcing an offside, so all of a sudden, they get a first down, and then you see Brown was just begging Hurts to let him get involved, and they forced it a bit too much, although there were some things that went into play here. Smith ended up getting a pass that was third and short. They end up pushing it over the line, which is something we saw them do a lot of the time last year, and I'm glad that it's something that they were doing a lot tonight, and Hurts ended up making it a first. But then this aggravates me. Hurts finds Brown in the end zone, touchdown. But Penny takes a holding penalty, which questionable, but it's a hold. Fine. Although I don't understand how that's a hold considering what they missed later on in the game, which again I will rant about. Hurts then tried to find Brown again in the end zone. Perfect pass, but literally on the next play. There was 2 bad miss holds. This was one of them. I don't understand how they miss AJ Brown's arm clearly being held there and pushed down, but no penalty. And that could have been a difference maker of a touchdown there and would have helped this game out. The refs really got brutal. And then Hurts had so much time multiple times on the rest of the drive. He got sacked twice and it moved them out of field goal position. I blame both Hurts and Johnson. I don't like the play calling there. They should have played it safe on that 3rd down and run the football to make sure that they could get the field goal and just bang that out. It's like I'm contradicting myself because I want them to be aggressive, but at the same time, there are times where you should know when to be aggressive and there are times when it's appropriate to be passive. That was a time it was appropriate to be passive, and I would have had no problem if they ran the football there on 3rd and long, especially because it's not like it was 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, where it's like, okay, throw the football, maybe. 3rd and long? No. Play it safe, and get the field goal. But at the same time, Hurts needed to be more aware, and he needed to throw the football away. The defense on the Vikings 9th drive, Osborne dropped it. A lot of, this is like the New England game, a lot of wide open plays for the Vikings, like the Patriots had, that were dropped, and the secondary got bailed out so much by some of these lucky breaks. A lot of open pass drops by the Vikings throughout this game. Sweat got to Cousins also. But just a bit late. Jefferson ended up getting it on a short pass, but again, brutal coverage. Jefferson had a field day because Goodrich was not good, and then Osborne, wide open in the end zone, makes it 27-20. But let's not forget the elephant in the room, the fact that Josh Sweat was right in striking distance of sacking Kirk Cousins, and nope, the Vikings left tackle gets no call for a hold there when it's one of the most. I could maybe justify. Actually, no, I can't even justify the AJ Brown one. I was gonna say maybe I could, but I can't. But that one, I understand them not calling as much. Like this one was really bad, and I just don't understand. Sweat was just outrageous that drive, and fortunately, the refs miss a blatant call. Then on the 11th drive for the offense, Swift had a huge run, got them into the red zone. Hurts with a good throw to Brown, 2 involved in there, and then Swift carried it into the end zone, 34-21. And then this last drive here by the Vikings, well, there was technically 2 more drives throughout the game, 1 for each team, but like the last real drive here, the defense pissed me off. Mainly the secondary and the linebacker play from this team pissed me off because it felt like they just were like, yep, game's over. We're 2-0. No. Let's go. Close this game out. And it just felt like they were lazy. They were missing some tackles or not even attempting. Like at one point, I think it was Cunningham who just didn't even like try to make a tackle. And then they're getting bailed out by drop passes. There was a flag in there at one point too. The Eagles end up getting a fumble on that play, but it got called back because they took a penalty. But it just felt like the defense gave up. And the Vikings ended up getting another touchdown there, and the game was just closer than it should have been. Game was just closer than it should have been, and it's just infuriating. But what can I tell you? Thankfully, they ended up closing it out regardless, though. So, yeah, Eagles 2-0. but I definitely have my concerns with this team. I want to see Hurts more effective in the passing game. I want to see, especially with all the weapons they have, like Goddard and Brown just haven't been noticeable, but that's not by their fault. That's not by design. That's because, granted, again, I understand the argument that if running the ball is working, run the ball, but I just selfishly want to see Hurts be effective with passing the football since we just have not seen it yet this season so far, and concerns me. And then the secondary needs to get healthy because, oh boy, if we have to watch more secondary play like this, oh boy, it's gonna be brutal. It's going to be brutal if we have to, but that's gonna be it for me. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you guys are new, especially if you're Eagle fans. Turn on your notifications so you know when I upload or go live next. And I will see you guys in the next one. Go Birds.